And he gathered them together into a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. Blood flowing out in a stream 200 miles long and as high as a horse's bridle. And the earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, as the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left.
Armageddon, Doomsday, the final battle, apocalypse. Prophesied not only in scripture, but forecast by other prophets since the days of the pharaohs. Prophets with chilling records, who call their warning across the decades, the centuries, and the millennia to a time that may mark the conclusion of human history. A time called the end time, our time, now. Saint Malachy, an Irish priest and prophet of the 12th century. In 1139, Saint Malachy accurately forecast the identity of every Roman Catholic pope who reigned from his time to the current Pope John Paul II, a total of 110 accurate predictions. And he predicted there would be only 2 more popes after this one. Nostradamus, a French physician of the 16th century, perhaps the most important prophet of European civilization. Nostradamus looked 400 years into mankind's future and saw a time of unparalleled carnage, and the man responsible for it. He called this man the second Antichrist, and pointed to him by name. Nostradamus's third Antichrist is on our horizon. Edgar Cayce, the most famous clairvoyant and psychic healer of 20th century America. Unique and detailed transcripts of Cayce's thousands of prophecies, such as the death of John F. Kennedy, demonstrate the uncanny accuracy of Cayce's predictions up to the present day. And Cayce has more things to say about our future. The miracle at Fatima, where 3 shepherd children reported having visions of the Virgin Mary. The children were given 3 secrets. The first was a vivid and horrific description of hell. The second predicted the outbreak of World War II and the slaughter that was to follow. The third prophecy, yet to come to pass, when read by Pope John XXIII, reportedly caused him to tremble with fear and almost faint with horror. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built as a tomb 26 centuries before Christ and studied today as an evolutionary blueprint for mankind, because some believe the Great Pyramid details almost the whole of recorded history, marking such milestones in the human experience as the exodus of the Israelites, the crucifixion, the American Revolution, the campaigns of Napoleon, and the Great Wars. And in man's very near future, in what the Egyptians call the Chamber of Ordeal, in our own times, is a bottomless pit.
Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouths.
For as long as human beings have walked the earth, they have attempted to divine their future. Much of this prophecy has concerned the end time, the wholesale destruction of life on the planet, even the destruction of the planet itself, whether by natural catastrophe, by divine intervention, or by man's own hand. And through the overwhelming majority of this prophecy runs a constant thread. The end time will be in the time of most people living today, which could explain the revival of interest in the words of respected seers across the ages who appear to have a collective message for 20th century man. Our own journey back across those ages, examining the prophecy of Armageddon, begins in the emerald tranquility of rural Ireland, the home in the 12th century of Saint Malachy. The first formally canonized Irish saint, Malachy was born into a wealthy and learned family in Armagh. From early childhood, he was drawn to the religious and mystical life. Saint Malachy's predictions, including those which concern us today, were made while he was on a pilgrimage to the Vatican, where he was appointed papal legate to Ireland. In Ireland, he was credited with performing miracles of healing, and there he also embarked on a program of church reform.
Malachy founded this abbey in the 12th century. It was the first great Cistercian foundation in Ireland, and from it sprang 38 other Cistercian monasteries. The Cistercians followed the rule created by St. Bernard of Clairvaux, a personal friend of Malachy's, and in fact, it was in St. Bernard's arms that Malachy died. And it is perhaps significant that Malachy is reported to have prophesied the day and hour of his own death. For today, millions believe that Malachy had a vision of the future, that through some gap in time, he saw the development of the world we live in and the end of that world. In the 16th century, it is reported that in the archives of the Vatican were found a series of mysterious prophecies created by St. Malachy. These were a few words, a list of popes, and just a few words describing them, mostly simple mottos. Now, it is very easy to come up with an old document and say, good heavens, this is a marvelous prophecy, and you point to the successful prophecies of the past. But perhaps the very fact that the prophecies have proved true is a proof that the prophecy was in fact written after the event. But one cannot say this about Malachy's prophecies, because the popes who have followed 1595, the date of the discovery of the document, have fitted the mottos quite as well as those go before. For example, take Benedict XIV. The motto for him in Malachy's list is Religio Depopulata, religion depopulated, religion destroyed, some conception of hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions dying. And when did Benedict XIV reign? Well, he was elected to the chair of Peter in 1914, the very year the First World War broke out. He died in 1922, at the end of the Russian Civil War. In those 8 years, Europe knew such a slaughter as it had never known before, even in the 30 Years' War that turned half Central Europe into a desert. Millions died in the blood and agony of the Western Front, untold millions in the great slaughters of the Eastern Front, and who knows how many millions in the civil wars between whites and reds, between the Greens of Machno, that swept Russia between the revolution of October 1917 and the establishment of Lenin's planned new paradise. But it is not only Benedict XIV of recent popes who fits this very well. The motto for the Pope John Paul I, De Medietate Lunae, roughly at the middle of the moon or the half moon. And when he came to the papal throne, commentators said it probably refers to his smile. It is rather like a lunar crescent. In fact, the motto had a much more sinister meaning. John Paul I died between one half moon and the next, one of the shortest reigning popes of the last 600 years.
Sit nomen Domini benedictum. Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, Filius, Spiritus Sanctus. Thank you very much.
But perhaps the most remarkable of the prophecies of Malachy concerning the present century is that which gives a motto for the present Pope, John Paul II, the first non-Italian Pope for centuries, the first or almost the youngest pope for many centuries, a matter which was prophesied, in fact, by other prophets for this coming pope. Malachy gave to John Paul II the motto De Labore Solis, of the labour of the sun. Now this is very curious, because the present pope is the first pope since the early church who has actually laboured with his hands, earned his living with his hands. For our Polish pope slaved in the quarries run by the Nazis in occupied Poland. He struggled with pickaxes, with hammers, against the loads burdened on him by the brutal guards. The first pope, think of that, who has worked with his hands for 1,500 years and who sweated in the sun in a Polish summer. But the motto has another significance. The Pope came from Krakow, the labour of the sun, and it was in Krakow that Copernicus, the great 16th century astronomer and mathematician who revolutionised man's view of the world by showing that the earth went round the sun and not as had been previously thought, the sun round the earth. Copernicus laboured for many years in Krakow, and here we have a pope, a Polish pope from Krakow, the labour of the sun, the very place where the labour of the sun took place. Now there is rather a sinister follow-on from this. For Malachy's list does not go on and on. There are only two more papal mottos given after our present pope. Gloria Olivae, the glory of the olive, which perhaps means peace, or perhaps means an olive-skinned pope from South America, or even the black pope from one of the Catholic churches so active in Africa. And then the last pope in Malachy's list. Malachy gave the simple name of Peter the Roman to his last pope. Remember, that is the pope after next, perhaps 20, perhaps 10, perhaps only 5 years from now. But to this simple title, Peter the Roman, the same name as the very first pope, he added several Latin sentences which contain a prophecy of terrifying and possibly sinister significance. He wrote, in English translation, during the last persecution of the Holy Roman Church, Peter the Roman shall feed the sheep amidst great tribulations, and when these are past, the city of the 7 hills shall be utterly destroyed, and the awful judge will judge the people. The city of the 7 hills, of course, is Rome, the end of Rome. And who is the judge? Will it be some political ruler inflicting great tribulations on Europe? Or will it be, as many believe, the final judgment?
Of all apocalyptic prophecies, none is more chilling than the 3 Antichrists of Nostradamus. 2 of these Antichrists, Napoleon and Hitler, have already wreaked their havoc on mankind. According to the prophecies of Nostradamus, the 3rd, and by far the most terrible Antichrist, walks among us now. Nostradamus was born at Saint-Rémy, France in 1503, the son of a wealthy notary public. He learned astrology from his grandfathers, both of whom claimed occasional visions of the future. As a young man, he was a medical student at the prestigious University of Montpellier when the Black Plague ravaged southern France. Nostradamus left medical school to treat victims of the epidemic, with such success that his work in arresting the plague won him national fame. In 1544, he settled in the French town of Salon, where he practiced medicine and astrology. It was in this house he was said to have caught glimpses of the future. He soon began to record these visions. Nostradamus deliberately wrote in cryptic phrases, employing anagrams, puns, and scientific jargon to obscure his meaning. It is said he considered it dangerous to give people too clear a picture of the future. It is also likely that he wisely was keen to avoid offending church authorities of the day, and thus left his predictions open to interpretation. In 1555, he published his famous work, Centuries, a book of prophecy set in verse. Author of several books on the life and prophecies of Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce.
Nostradamus was indisputably one of the greatest prophets of all time. Here in this house at Salon was where his reputation really became made. He was sent for by Queen Catherine de' Medici of France to explain a prophecy he'd made that her husband, the king, would be killed in a duel.
The young lion shall overcome the old one in martial field by a single duel. In a golden cage he shall put out his eye. 2 wounds from one, then shall he die a cruel death.
Now this was an impossibility. Kings were not challenged to duels. But 4 years later, the king held a great marriage celebration for his sister and his daughter, and they had an honorary jousting in Paris, in the Saint Antoine. The 2 days went marvelously. The king was victorious in his golden helmet, but on the 3rd day, he jousted twice favourably against the captain of the Scottish Guard, despite the fact that Catherine herself had premonitions and didn't wish him to fight, and nor did various other people. And on the 3rd list, as he turned, Montgomery's lance tilted, hit the king through the golden visor, through the eye, out through the head, the 2 wounds in one through the golden helmet, as Nostradamus had predicted, in a duel. And 10 days later, Henry II of France was dead.
So Nostradamus's reputation was made, a prophet with honor in his own land and in his own time. With the passing of time, future generations were to have good cause also to heed the words of Nostradamus, when he looked ahead more than 2 centuries to describe his first Antichrist, the first of 3, Napoleon.
An emperor shall be born near Italy, who shall cost the empire dear. When it is seen with whom he allies himself, he shall be found less a prince than a butcher.
Nostradamus further predicted,
The man with cropped hair shall assume authority. In a maritime city held by the enemy, he will expel the vile men who oppose him. And for 14 years, he will rule with absolute power.
Napoleon, unlike previous French rulers, had cropped his hair short and had first won fame in 1793 by recapturing the Mediterranean port of Toulon from the British. He then expelled the Directoire and ruled France for 14 years. Nostradamus further prophesied that Napoleon would be a fearsome ruler, causing to tremble Italy, Spain, and the English. But France, he continued,
will have chosen badly. Its strength will be sapped by him.
and indeed the flower of French youth fell on the road to Napoleonic glory. The prophet continued with remarkable accuracy to predict Napoleon's exile, escape, ultimate defeat at Waterloo, and lonely death on St. Helena.
The captive prince conquered to Elba. He will pass the Gulf of Genoa by sea to Marseille. He is completely conquered by a great effort of foreign forces. He will end his life far from where he was born, among 5,000 people of strange customs and language on a chalky island in the sea.
Mankind had to wait until the 20th century for the arrival of Nostradamus' second Antichrist.
Out of the steepest part of Western Europe, from poor people, a child will be born, who with his tongue will seduce many people.
In uns selbst allein liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes. Wenn wir selbst dieses deutsche Volk emporführen durch eigene Arbeit, durch eigenen Fleiß, eigene Entschlossenheit, eigenen Trotz, eigene Beharrlichkeit, dann werden wir wieder emporsteigen, genau wie die Väter einst aus Deutschland nicht Geschenk erhielten, sondern selbst nicht schaffen mussten.
The great Squawker will be elected governor of the army. They shall pursue crosses of iron, topsy-turvy. He shall cause the furnace to be rebuilt. Brothers and sisters shall be slaves in various places. Worse than ever did Nero will see the spilling of brave human blood.
If Nostradamus is right, yet again, man will not have long to wait for the third Antichrist to make himself known.
The third Antichrist is one of the most important of Nostradamus' predictions because he predicted two other Antichrists, Napoleon and Hitler, both by name and both of whom have come true. Therefore, one cannot disregard this third one, who shall appear sometime in the 80s, though the time he actually comes to his full power is not wholly clear. He certainly will arise in the East for fear of armaments built up in the West, according to Nostradamus, and that, of course, is probably where the war in New York and the nuclear war turns up.
Near the new city, in the way of the man-made mountains, shall be seized on and plunged into a ferment. Being forced to drink sulphurous poisoned waters. The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great city. Immediately, a huge scattered flame leaps up.
Apocalyptic prophecy is not the exclusive preserve of our distant past. One graphic warning comes from the most remarkable prophet and psychic healer of this century, Edgar Cayce, who was born in 1877 in an isolated rural community in Kentucky. During his lifetime, while in self-induced trances, Cayce diagnosed illnesses and recommended treatment for thousands of patients. And follow-up research reveals an amazing success rate. His prophecies have also proved uncomfortably accurate. Cayce grew up in Kentucky a quiet, religious, troubled, and rather backward child, a condition that must have been aggravated, if not caused, by the early discovery by friends and neighbors that he had odd powers. At first, full of self-doubt and confusion as to the use and effectiveness of his gifts, Cayce willingly submitted to grueling tests by doctors. The skepticism of the medical profession gave way very little, but Cayce himself came to believe in his powers and devoted his life to healing and to prophecy. Even in the early days, when Cayce began having his visions here in the Kentucky countryside, he reportedly did not like to make predictions. He believed in free will and did not like to influence people who might be susceptible to suggestion. Certainly his prophecies were a byproduct of his desire to help others. The reluctant prophet's grandson, Dr. Charles Cayce.
Many people in the United States consider Edgar Cayce, my grandfather, to be the most carefully documented and perhaps the most accurate psychic of modern times, perhaps the most accurate ever in the United States. I think part of that is because of the careful documentation of the psychic readings that he gave. All of the 14,000 readings that he gave are in our library here at Virginia Beach and can be studied by people who are interested.
The founder and a director of the Readings Research Department at the Association of Research and Enlightenment Library in Virginia, May St. Clair.
To me, he was a fabulous man. That I didn't determine when I first knew him. I came to know that because I saw him meet and talk with people and help people just talking with them, to say nothing of how he helped me. Day after day I went to him and just asked him plain, ordinary questions, and he would answer them for me. He gave me explanations for some of the problems I'd had. He told me about the relationships that I had trouble with and where they had come from, and set me on the road to an entirely different life. I would say he was among the greatest of the great. He knew so much more, he saw so much more than anybody ever knew. He was very recalcitrant. He took his time. He didn't elaborate. He didn't make big, splashing statements. He did give us some milestones, some dates for milestones to think around. I think there'll be some very drastic changes at the end of this century. Drastic.
It was back in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and in the surrounding countryside, that Edgar Cayce first had some of the visions and made some of the prophecies that would prove so alarmingly accurate. An accuracy rate, according to his followers, of over 90%. Cayce often turned his powers to matters financial and economic. He warned friends with investments in Wall Street in early 1929 to sell every share they owned. But they had been doing so well for so long on a rising market, they attributed their success to their own judgment rather than to Cayce's advice. They did not listen. Within 6 months, the stock market crash occurred. $15 billion were lost and millions of investors wiped out. Cayce made wide-ranging predictions regarding the affairs of nations. He accurately picked the dates for the beginning and end of World War I and World War II. He foretold the independence of India, and he looked ahead to the day when a Jewish homeland would be established, the day when the State of Israel would be declared. When Cayce turned his clairvoyant powers on his native United States, much of what he saw was unsettling, but, as almost always, accurate. He saw, in his words, a time in the United States when there will be great stress, as brother rises against brother, as group or sect or race rises against race, yet the leveling must come. And he foretold, during this time of racial unrest, of the event in Dallas, Texas, that stunned a nation and the world.
The President of the United States is dead.
The vast majority of Cayce's predictions appear to have come to pass, and he made more predictions for the last years of the millennium. According to Cayce, a period of unprecedented upheaval. He prophesied that doctrinaire communism in China will give way to a more democratic form of government. He prophesied drastic and sudden physical changes in the Earth's surface before 1998 because of shifts in the polar axis, as a result of which northern Europe will disappear below the ocean in the twinkling of an eye. Japan, he said, will be destroyed by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. He prophesied that World War III will erupt in 1999. And he prophesied that within a year of that war starting, civilization as we know it will end. On January the 1st, 1945, Edgar Cayce made one final prediction. He predicted that his own funeral would take place in 4 days. He was correct. Mother Mary Angelica is the founder and chairman of the board of the Eternal World Television Network. Mother Angelica is also a student of the phenomenon that took place at Fatima in 1917.
I think there are many people today that are looking forward to the great battle, the Armageddon. I think there is already the beginning of a battle. There is no question that the battle has begun. There is no question that there are a separation into camps. There is no question that there is in the world more and more development of satanic worship. And when we're talking about satanic worship, we're talking about two camps, very definite marks, again, two separate camps. In Our Lady of Fatima, the message is very definite.
When Our Lady of Fatima appeared at the Portuguese village of Fatima in May of 1917, she could be seen and heard only by 3 shepherd children. Other observers reported seeing a bright cloud during the visits. The children described seeing a young, beautiful being in the sky. Our Lady of Fatima, who identified herself to the children as the Virgin Mary, told them she would visit again on October 13, 1917, which was to be her last visit, and at which time she said she would perform a miracle, all shall see, so that they may believe. Our Lady said that she would impart 3 secrets to the children on that day. When the appointed day arrived, upwards of 80,000 people jammed the village. The faithful were drawn by the prophecy of the miracle. A good number of non-believers were in attendance as well, including reporters from major European newspapers. The gathering was not disappointed. The reporters called it a mysterious solar occurrence. The faithful used the term, the dancing sun.
When the miracle of the sun occurred, when all these thousands of people had occurred on a very rainy day, pouring rain, all with umbrellas, standing in mud, stood there, waiting for something great to happen. And suddenly, somebody said, look at the sun, and it began to dance. And the frightening thing of it was that as it danced back and forth and beautiful rays began to emanate from it, it began to almost come forward as if it were going to fall. And the people were horrified, just terrible. You read accounts of that, you see pictures of it, and you see these people falling on their knees, asking God for pardon, suddenly seeing themselves as they really were before God. And then it seemed to go back again, and suddenly it seemed to fall back again. It was a phenomenal thing.
By all accounts, the sun whirled on its axis like a pinwheel, throwing out white, blue, and green lights. Our Lady of Fatima revealed to the 3 children the reason for this visitation. She said that she wanted humanity to change its ways, or that 3 awful prophecies would come true. The first prophecy was an horrific description of a very real hell.
So it proved to the children and it proved to the people that this was an apparition. These apparitions from May 13th to October 13th was a warning from the Lord that we must straighten out our ways. Now, if you look at the world in 1917, and you look at it now, you begin to realize why Our Lady loved us enough to say, hey, straighten out. You're gone in the wrong direction.
The second secret threatened a second world war. The signal that the war was about to begin would be a great unknown light in the night skies, lighting up the whole of Western Europe and turning night into day. When you see the night lit up by the great unknown light, know that it is a sign that God gives you of the punishment of the world by another war, famine, and persecution of the Holy Church and of the Holy Father. The third secret of Fatima lies ahead. This third secret was entrusted to the Vatican with the instructions that it be opened in 1960. A source inside the Vatican reported that Pope John XXIII confided to a few friends he had read the third secret of Fatima, and that upon reading it, He had trembled with fear and had almost fainted with horror. There has been alleged text of the third secret published. The Vatican refuses to either confirm or deny its authenticity.
A great war will break out in the second half of the 20th century. Fire and smoke will fall from heaven. The water of the oceans will become vapors. Millions and millions of men will perish while this is going on, and those who survive will envy the dead. The unexpected will follow in every part of the world. Anxiety, pain, and misery in every country. The time is getting nearer, and the abyss is getting wider without hope.
I think the times and the signs of the times indicate certainly that there is something definitely going to happen that will indicate the intervention of God in our history. I think that is inevitable. I think if we pray, we may mitigate whatever the catastrophes may be coming. But I think we could do away with it completely if enough people pray. If not, this is the thing, if not, then I think by various things, weather, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, the Lord will gradually give us signs and warnings to repent.
Atop a hill overlooking the tiny mountain village of Garabandel in Spain, a small clump of pine trees. A beautiful place, but otherwise unremarkable, except for the message that would make this hill the most famous place on our planet, if the message given to 4 Spanish girls a quarter of a century ago is true. A message about a miracle soon to take place at this spot, a permanent sign for all the world to see. And one of the girls, Conchita Gonzalez, now a grown woman and a mother herself, believes that she was given the exact date of that miracle. In Conchita's words,
I was 12 years old then, and I was with my 3 friends. We heard a loud noise like thunder. Suddenly, a very beautiful figure appeared to me. Then the other girls saw it. We froze for a moment, then ran towards the church, very frightened. Most of the people thought we were making it up. I was very sad going to bed that night. When I was saying my prayers, I heard a voice that said, "Do not be troubled. You will see me again."
over the next 4 years, the girls experienced many visions of the Virgin Mary as they fell into deep trances, sometimes lasting for minutes, sometimes for hours. The trances of the girls attracted much attention to the sleepy village of Garabandel. Priests and later psychologists attended the girls in their ecstasies. There were believers and non-believers, but few questioned the sincerity of the small girls. After the girls had been experiencing visions of the Virgin Mary for about 4 months, Conchita announced that she had been told that there was a purpose to their visions. The Virgin Mary had chosen them to receive a message which they were to give to the world.
We must make many sacrifices, perform much penance, and visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently, Our Lady said. We must lead good lives. If we do not, a chastisement will befall us. The cup is already filling up, and if we do not change, a very great chastisement will come upon us.
And 4 years later, in 1965, Conchita was given a second and final message for the world. Conchita was now 15 years of age. Her visions would soon cease. The girls had twice been given a message for the world about the great chastisement, during which visions they were heard to scream in terror. But Conchita was also told of 2 events that would first come to pass: a worldwide warning, and then a miracle for all to see, in the hope that the chastisement might be averted.
On the day of the warning, everyone in the whole world will see a sign. They will find themselves all alone in the world, no matter where they are at that time, along with their consciences. The warning will be very personal. We will all react differently to it. To me, I understand, it is like a preparation to see the miracle. On the day of the miracle, the Virgin said everyone who would go there on that day to Garabandel would see it. The sick who go will be cured, no matter what their disease or their religion. Those without faith will believe. Also from that moment, there will be a permanent sign in the pines. Everyone present there could view it. The sign would be visible and could be touched, but not felt. I can't explain it. This sign will stay until the end of time. The Virgin told me the day, the month, and the year, so I know the exact date. The Blessed Mother said to tell the date 8 days before, so this is what I'm going to do.
These visions, telling of a worldwide warning, then a miracle at Garabandel, and the date of that miracle, and telling of a possible chastisement to follow, brought to Conchita Gonzalez and to Garabandel a celebrity that was to change her life irrevocably. She found herself the center of attention, caught up in a constant crush of church officials, the media, the faithful from all over Europe, who flocked to Conchita's small village seeking advice, reassurance, help.
The Blessed Mother loves everyone equally. Some people ask questions, as if I had insight into what is happening in the world, and I have absolutely none. I'm not special. The people of my village were constantly giving me advice. Do this, give up that. I thought how I would like to be in an hermitage, away from everyone. I loved the village of Garabandel, but there was no way I could live there any longer.
Conchita left Spain and sought the anonymity one can find in a crowd among the teeming millions of New York City. In 1974, she married the proprietor of a pizzeria on Long Island. And there she lives today, in relative obscurity with her husband and 4 children. Garabandel behind her, but carrying with her still the message that she received at the Pines and looking with some trepidation towards the time, 8 days before the event, when she can announce the miracle at Garabandel and perhaps the chastisement to follow.
I feel afraid. For this, I try to prepare my children to have a strong faith. I am really going to be scared that day. I hope the Blessed Mother takes me with my children after the miracle. I hope this for everybody. I hope they do not have to go through the punishment. There is something terrible. I hope we don't see it. I think it is better we die before that. For me, it is very close. I think it is very close.
Across the Nile from Cairo, the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monument to the pharaoh Cheops, founder of the 4th dynasty of ancient Egypt, has presided mute over the shifting sands of time since the very edge of prehistory. But today there is a body of opinion that holds that this wonder of the ancient world, covering a perfectly proportioned 13 acres, is anything but mute, and in fact speaks volumes about mankind's history and about his destiny. A building so perfect in its proportions and so enormous in its dimensions that its construction should have been impossible. It is these perfect proportions that most fascinate students of the Great Pyramid. Pyramidologist Peter Le Masurier.
The theory is that the Great Pyramid in some way represents the Earth, and that the passages through it represent mankind's passage through the earth. So it's, if you like, it's the history of mankind, the present of mankind, and the future, all laid out in stone. As you come up to the original entrance, you're under this great gable, which is now exposed and was originally covered by masonry. And from the original entrance, the passageway goes down at a width of 2 royal cubits, straight down into the pyramid and straight down into the rock underneath it. Until eventually it gets to a point where if it kept on going down, you'd start getting trouble from Nile water and this sort of thing. It then, at a slightly smaller bore, starts cutting away horizontally into what's known as the subterranean passage. And this leads through a sort of what looks like a rock fall, which is known as the lesser subterranean chamber. And eventually, if you don't watch out, you fall headlong into the great subterranean chamber, which is an absolute nightmare, and which seems to have been known to the Egyptians as the chamber of central fire, or the chamber of ordeal, which has got a sort of bottomless pit in the middle of it. It's really quite a nightmarish place. It struck people for at least 100 years that if you compare the general pattern of the passageways with the shape of history, there's an extraordinary fit. Now, for various reasons, some people thought originally that the whole thing, in a sense, reflected the Bible. That if you had a given measure and the beginning was somewhere around the time of Abraham or something like this, then the beginning of the ascending passage would come at about the time of Christ, and people started to look at what the measurements might be. The theory basically is that the passages representing human history are laid out on the basis of an inch per year. So once you've got a datum, somewhere to start with, you can actually measure what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. The only snag being that there are some steps in the passageways, and these seem to signify changes of scale. But we can calculate those as well. If you started counting off the years on the sloping passageways at an inch per year, you got a surprisingly good historical fit. And then the Astronomer Royal for Scotland discovered a couple of scored lines in the passageways, quite a way in from the entrance. And these seem to have been pointing at the Seven Sisters, the stars in the sky, at the spring equinox in 2141 BC. Well, supposing that was a marker, supposing that was a go from here, like a sort of snakes and ladders game, if you like. If you counted back to the original entrance from that 2141 BC, from these scored lines, you found it came in 2623 BC, which was during the reign of Khufu, or Cheops, who's supposed to have built the thing, which does sort of, it suggests you may be on the right track. If you carry on down that descending passage, where the ascending passage starts to climb, you find that that date comes out at 1453 BC, and there's a pretty good amount of evidence to suggest that's about the date of the Israelite Exodus. If you then, on the same scale, carry on up the ascending passage, just ignoring those granite blocks for the moment, you get to a point where the roof suddenly shoots up into the Grand Gallery. Now that comes on our present Gregorian calendar, 1st of April, 33 AD, which seems to be a jolly good date for the crucifixion. If you carry on up the Grand Gallery from there, you find that the roof comes back down and you get to the north wall of the Grand Gallery in June of 1914, and that seems to be pretty significant too, which does seem to suggest that the King's Chamber complex at the top does cover our own age in some way. The same sort of thing happens in the subterranean passages too. Where you tumble into the subterranean passage is once again the summer of 1914. So that the chamber of central fire, the chamber of ordeal, which is what the Egyptians apparently call the subterranean chamber, is our own times, and in the middle of it is a sort of bottomless pit. The period of revolutions, the American Revolution, all the European revolutions of 1848, Napoleon's campaigns and the wars and so on, these seem to be marked in the subterranean chamber. What you actually get at that particular point is a kind of roof fall, as if the roof has fallen in, so to speak. But it's been deliberately cut in that way, as though to suggest that something was happening to the old order. And in the subterranean chamber, for example, you have what looks like a forecast of a slump round about the 1970s, a further one the beginning of the 1980s, both of which we've had. And then round about 2004, suddenly the floor drops away under your feet. Well, in 1999, there seems to be this indication in the upper passageways of a totally new spiritual order, if you like. Kingdom of heaven, you might think of it in those terms. But very shortly after that, in the subterranean chamber, is the beginning of this bottomless pit. It's obviously designed to be like a bit of a bottomless pit where the carpet is pulled out from under our feet. Well, the sort of thing that seems to be staring in the face in the subterranean chamber is a total collapse of civilization in some kind in the year 2004, give or take 2 or 3 years.
Of course, not everyone accepts as valid this stroll through the halls of history as laid out inside the Great Pyramid. But had the Great Pyramid been less accurate, many would find it easier to shrug off the speculation of pyramidologists that the course of human history was revealed to a chosen people, and that they then constructed this record of it in stone. A record durable enough to survive until its term of prediction had run out.
For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them.
In conservative Protestant circles in the United States, the fundamentalist belief is flourishing that the world as we know it is coming to an end. Not because some general or madman will push a button and reduce our planet to ash, but because, as the fundamentalists see it, God has had it planned that way for at least 1900 years. William Martin is a sociology teacher at Rice University in Texas, a writer on religious subjects.
Since the beginning of Christian history, people have expected Jesus to return again. Sometimes the scenario varies, but there's probably been no time in the history of Christianity when more people have expected Jesus to return again imminently. I think it's fair to say that upwards of 20 million Americans now believe with all their hearts that Armageddon is just around the corner.
Because most people, even the President of the United States of America, has made mention of the Battle of Armageddon. The people in the White House, in the Senate, they've all talked about the Battle of Armageddon. Everywhere people are aware of it. Even in Russia, they know about the Battle of Armageddon. But did you know they're not going to be able to help themselves? In the 19th chapter of Isaiah, God said he's going to put a hook in a northern army's jaw and drag them into this battle. God wants them to be in this battle because it's going to be the battle of all battles. It's going to be the battle. It's going to cause Jesus to step down from glory. Hallelujah. And he's going to fight with the little nation Israel, and he's going to win the battle.
So we have politicians using the word Armageddon out of context. We have the news media using the word Armageddon out of context.
Hilton Sutton, an American evangelist and student of biblical prophecy.
Well, presently, we are in a period in which there are many prophetic events that are being fulfilled that were written by one or more of the Old Testament prophets, or the Lord Jesus Christ, or one of his disciples. We have an excellent track record of prophecies that are within the scriptures being fulfilled with absolute accuracy and to minute details. The Battle of Armageddon will occur, as I've pointed out, in the valley of Megiddo and the plains of the valley of Jezreel, which really stretch from the outskirts of the city of Jerusalem to the city of Haifa, quite a large area in Israel. There, the armies of the Antichrist, 10 of them, plus the huge Oriental army that will have come in from the north, will have merged together. It is occurring in the final month of that 7-year period we identify as tribulation. Of course, it occurs on the final day. The scene is a dreadful one. There has been no natural light of sun, moon, and stars over that area for quite a number of days. Plagues have been released and that have produced boils on the bodies of the men that are involved. There has been no water to drink in that area. All sources of water will have become blood. If one quenches his thirst or mops his fevered brow, he must do it with blood. It's going to be a terrifying hour. The heat of the sun will be increased many times. Though the rays of the sun do not get through the darkness, the heat will. The people are in a, and it's only in that area, it's not worldwide. The people are in a terrifying condition and a painful one. The scriptures say they will be gnawing their tongues because of pain. And yet, when Christ returns to the earth, they will be demonically inspired to attack the city of Jerusalem. That's when he, standing on the Mount of Olives from the east side of Jerusalem, will speak the word that is recorded in Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 12. And that plague that is released reduces that huge armada of men to a pool of blood within a period of only 1 hour. The battle begins and ends. Now, what I want to say is that we have much hope that we are not facing the end of the world, even though Armageddon were to occur tomorrow, which it isn't. But were it to do so, would not bring the end of the world. There still must be that 1,000-year reign of peace and righteousness of the Messiah over all governments.
I'm accused of being simplistic at times with some of the problems that confront us. I've often wondered, within the covers of that single book, are all the answers to all the problems that face us today. I've always believed that we were put here for a reason, that there is a path, somehow a divine plan for all of us. And I've also always believed that America was set apart in a special way. To preserve our blessed land, we must look to God. Do we really think that we can have it both ways? That God will protect us in a time of crisis, even as we turn away from Him in our day-to-day life? Maybe it's later than we think.
While the fundamentalists prepare spiritually for Armageddon, there is a growing number of individuals preparing in their own way for the collapse of civilization that they are convinced lies just around the corner. The B&B gun shop in Los Angeles, California, are armorers to the survivalist.
Slide release right here.
Ace Barron.
The survivalist battery of weapons includes many things that you see on the wall here beside me. We've got a great variety of semi-automatic, bolt-action, lever-action rifles and things of this nature. The more popular calibers in this country rely on things like your .22-250, your small varmint calibers, but your survivalists tend to go with police and military calibers, things of the nature of the .308 or .762 NATO, the smaller .223 or 5.56, and then your handgun cartridges, .22, .357, .45, 9mm, things along that line.
This will kick less, so you have a second shot capability for home protection.
It doesn't have a safety on the outside, which is great, because in a stress situation, especially with women, you don't want to be messing with the safety. Right. You don't want to sit there and guess if it's on or off.
Exactly. The purpose of these weapons, the reason he's buying specifically these cartridges and these calibers are, they've been proven in combat for use against people, obviously. They look at this in the sense that they have to get ammo in a post-Holocaust situation, post-nuclear war, whatever it might be, domestic, anything. They want to be able to get ammunition and spare parts and things like this. And quite frankly, your police and military use the same thing, and they have stockpiles of the weapons, the ammunition, spare parts, everything they would need to make these weapons functional. And then you're going to run into situations, black market, whatever that amounts to. In a post-war situation, the survivalists know this. They will be able to come up with the ammunition, the weapons, the parts, whatever they need, because their ultimate goal is to survive.
Far from the world's great cities, at places like Tall Timber Ranch and the remote forests of Oregon, whole groups have banded together with that same aim in mind, survival.
All right. Keep going.
This stuff is ridiculous.
Just a second. Okay, just at me.
Can we get the dog in the picture?
Yes, if we can. Finish, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
Put it right away.
Before the guests get scared.
In common with many survivalist groups, the emphasis at this stronghold in America's Northwest is on self-reliance. Self-reliance for the time in the wake of apocalypse, when food supplies will have been wiped out, all services will have ceased to exist, anarchy will prevail, and the only people with a chance of survival will be those who equip themselves with food, with seed, with livestock, with building materials, with everything necessary to claw their way back from the Stone Age.
What's the tail action there? How about right there?
Tall timber owner and survivalist, Roy Masters.
I do believe an Armageddon is coming because people and society is going crazy, going stark raving mad. Every answer the politicians, the psychiatrists, the religious people pose for us, the more problems they create. And so there's could be nothing else but more hatred and resentment building up towards one another until we destroy one another. There's a few of us who will leave our high-paying jobs in big cities, and we flee the corruption and the crime and the filth and the degradation of the city to begin the world all over again. I don't know whether I can survive, or anybody can survive it, but I owe it to my family to try.
That's 5 weeks.
Not just private citizens, but governments too are starting to prepare for the unthinkable. Most nations in both East and West have made provisions for sheltering their government and military leaders in the event of Holocaust. The Swiss have gone one step further. Their aim is to provide shelter for every citizen in the country. This tunnel through the Sonnenberg Mountains near Lucerne serves today as part of a public highway. Tomorrow, it could have a very different function, for running off the tunnel, deep into the mountainside, is an underground city. A city complete with sleeping accommodation, dining facilities, food and water supplies, air purification plants, a communications system, hospital facilities, operating theaters, a place, perhaps, to survive for 20,000 people. That they would survive, at least briefly, is probable. What they would find when they emerged from their concrete cocoon, whether they would be glad they survived, is debatable. Apocalypse, cataclysm, Armageddon. A 12th century priest, a 16th century French physician, a 20th century psychic healer, ecstatic visions on the Iberian Peninsula, the Great Pyramid of Giza, fundamentalist belief based on the Book of Revelations. All these vehicles of prophecy have two things in common. In the first place, each has a record of apparent accuracy. The second thing these prophecies share is a common thread that links the end of civilization as we know it to a point in time that falls within the lifetime of most of us living today. A point in time a few short years into our future. Armageddon, St. Malachy, Irish priest and prophet of the 12th century. St. Malachy accurately forecast 110 Roman Catholic popes, up to and including the current Pope, John Paul II, Malachy says there will be only 2 more popes after this one. Armageddon, Nostradamus, respected prophet and physician of 16th century France. Amongst hundreds of accurate predictions, Nostradamus foretold of the impact on civilization of 3 Antichrists, the first 2 being Napoleon and Hitler. Nostradamus says the 3rd Antichrist walks among us now. Armageddon, Edgar Cayce, famous clairvoyant and psychic healer of 20th century America. Cayce accurately predicted the establishment of Israel, the assassination of President Kennedy, World War I and World War II. Cayce also predicted the start of World War III and the collapse of civilization in 1999. Armageddon, Fatima, the Portuguese village where shepherd children were given 3 secrets by a vision of the Virgin Mary. The first, a graphic description of hell. The second, an accurate sign for the start of World War II. It is alleged that the 3rd secret, entrusted to the Vatican, says that after World War III, to start in this century, the survivors will envy the dead. Armageddon, Garabandel, the Spanish village where Conchita Gonzalez was given during years of ecstatic visions, a message that haunts her to this day. A message for mankind about a terrible chastisement that has Conchita fearing for her children, and she believes she knows the date of that chastisement. And it is in her lifetime. Armageddon, the Great Pyramid of Giza, built 4,500 years ago and studied as a blueprint for history. Many believe the Great Pyramid accurately predicted the dates of the crucifixion of Christ, the campaigns of Napoleon, World War I, World War II, and World War III, about the year 2000, when mankind will fall into a bottomless pit. Is it coincidence that all these prophecies link Armageddon in time with the turn of our century? Possibly, but there is a further coincidence. All of these predictions for Armageddon, most of them centuries old, coincide exactly with that moment in human history when it is within man's power to make these horrific predictions come to pass, to bring the apocalypse upon himself in this nuclear age.